Testing, testing. Oh, where's he gone? Hello. Brilliant. Gary, do you want
My name's Gary Nash and I'm a practicing independent financial advisor based in the City of London. A lot of the practices which we use as advisors are very legacy based, they're old fashioned and ultimately lead to a huge amount of administration, which I think could easily be got rid of if we had the appropriate technology to implement that. As Ian touched on, we operate and we work within a regulated environment, and for us it's regulated by the Financial Services Authority. And what regulation really means is that we have to carry out a lot of our processes in a very regimented and processed way. And what regulation does to any business really is increase the time it takes to implement advice and to actually deliver that advice. And therefore, our time and our costs increase as well with that regulation. Now, one of the big issues with the FSA and regulation at the moment is the Retail Distribution Review, or the RDR, which you may have come across. It's quite a wide-reaching legislation, but I think the main significance in terms of what we do is that we will move out of a commission-based environment to a purely fee-based environment. And a big emphasis is to be placed on transparency of costs. There's going to be an increased emphasis and need for us to actually justify our costs and a greater need for efficiency in the processes we use to actually deliver the services which clients need at a price which is affordable. So one of the first areas I see which is quite problematic for advisors is actually interacting with the client in the first place. And that first meeting, as you can see from the slide, it often can feel like a blind date. But there's no real means at the moment of clients really providing us with the data we need to see if that meeting is going to be of any value to us as advisors and if it's going to lead anywhere. And in the same context, for the client as a consumer, there's an awful lot of time and effort which they have to invest into what may be a pointless exercise in the end. So there's a real opportunity here, I think, where technology can step into that breach and enable clients to have a means of communicating with advisors in a way which is friendly to them, which doesn't waste all their time. One of the big areas, and I brought a copy with me tonight, is what we call the fact find document. And this is how we currently record client information. So if you want to come and speak to a financial advisor, for the most part, and this is what goes on in our company at the moment, it may well be better elsewhere. But if you want to speak to a financial advisor, you'll have to fill out one of these, which is a 30-page monstrosity of essentially everything you could ever want to talk about in your life, hence the slide. What this does is mean that clients and advisors have to give up sufficient amounts of time, probably at least an hour, to complete this document. And it will run through, as I said, income, expenditure, all the kind of hard and soft facts we need in which to deliver advice. For the client, as you can imagine, even if they've come to a meeting, they have to fill out all this data, might not lead anywhere. All they've done is fill out a paper-based document. If they want to go and get a second opinion, they'll have to go and repeat this process again and again. All that fact find does is capture that data in that particular moment. So if we want to review that client, we want to see them in a year's time, again, the fact find will have to be updated, completed, signed again by the client to say it's correct. So it's a very significant amount of administration, both from the client and the advisor. And the other thing which really lacks from it is it's not an interactive experience. The client hands over their data to the advisor and really doesn't see that document again. They can request it, but if they want to update that information, they would have to physically contact the advisor and make arrangements to do that. What we don't have at the moment is something which the client could go and log into, could update their information, and which that could then automatically update the advisor as well, where the circumstances are changed. And as you can imagine, that can lead to quite a significant amount of missed opportunity for us as advisors, because we're really not seeing client circumstances as and when they change. And also for the clients, they're potentially missing out on some valuable advice if tax years pass and they have perhaps made something like a pension contribution which could mitigate tax. So there's quite a lot of wastage again on that side of things. The final area, which I think any of you who've ever spoke to a financial advisor before or even dealt with any financial company will recognise, is the fact that we have to verify identity of any new client we see. This normally will be proof of identification through a current passport or driving licence, and also proof of address, something dated within the last 3 months. Every time we see a client, they have to bring that in, we scan it, photocopy it, we put it on file, and it's fine for a while, but when we see them again, we have to ask them to bring in a new utility bill or a new bank statement. So it's very onerous, and I think with all the technologies which are out there at the moment, the ways of validating clients and proving identification, it seems quite tragic that we're still kind of using these methods at the moment. So to just kind of summarise those points, the current process in which we interact with clients and we receive new clients is very outdated. It leads to a lot of wasted time on both the advisor side and also on the client side. The overall procedure in receiving financial advice, I think it places a very heavy burden on consumers at the moment. If you imagine you're having to complete sufficient amounts of paperwork, and the fact find I've noted tonight is just one aspect of that. There's many others, ranging from key facts documents, menu documents, financial reports which they'll have to read, identity verification. All these things happen before a client's actually received any value from the advice itself, and these processes have to be repeated again and again. So I think there must be something we can do to help consumers, and which puts some power back in their hands, and which actually reflects their lifestyles, as opposed to the current system, which is a kind of one-size-fits-all approach. The current process for financial advisors means that it's very time inefficient, and it drives up our costs. And ultimately it means that, especially with the RDR coming and the move to a fee world, that we're going to end up pricing ourselves out of the mass market, because we've not got the systems in place to deal with clients on an efficient basis. And it's also limited the number of people we can see at any given time. So thanks for listening, and happy to take any questions now.
Thanks, Gary. That actually reminds me of The Land That Time Forgot, which is a film you may have seen.
Yeah,
do we have any questions for Gary?
How big is the market you're representing? First part of the question. And the second part of the question is, how much would you pay for a service that would cover what you're looking for?
In terms of what market I'm representing, I think predominantly, obviously, the advisor community, and I would say predominantly the independent, advisor community. I'm not entirely sure. I've never been to a tied advisor such as a bank, and I don't know. I'd envision that perhaps the bank's technology is slightly better than what we tend to have at our disposal. But yeah, very much advisors who are out there in the space want to communicate to clients the services they provide, so that we, first of all, we can actually market ourselves in terms of what we're looking to, build our service upon. And then moving past that, to actually have a process which enables us to advise clients in a time-efficient manner, enables us to see more people, and not price out, huge swathes of the market, because the process, it takes too long and we have to put our fees up correspondingly. The second part, in terms of how much we pay, at the moment, if you look at our back office systems, and if you ever want to have a look at kind of tragic systems, have a look at those, the way in which we kind of record data and process fees and commissions. We currently have to pay for that about £80 a month, and to be honest, it's completely useless. So I would envision for something which actually worked and helped us, anything up to probably £100, £150 a month would be fine.
Thank you.
Can I just ask that too slightly, Mike? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, there's 40 or 50,000 advisors in the country? 35,000, and I think 100 or 200 a month is probably about the kind of figure you're looking at. Is that right? For existing systems. But there's a bigger picture, which is those 35,000 advisors probably influence, tens of billions of pounds worth of investments. And that's potentially where there are lots of ancillary benefits. And other systems you can link to and so on. So it's not just about revenues you gain from advisors on subscriptions. I think there's a lot of other ways of creating revenue out of that stream. Okay, any other questions? Everyone?
The IFA industry has always struck me as being very fragmented.
Mm-hmm.
How big and what level of revenue does your average IFA firm generate?
That's an interesting question. It's something which me and Eddie often discuss. In terms of on a grander scale, first of all, talking about IFAs as individuals, I think even within a single business, they are very fragmented. I think people are often, kind of in it for themselves. There's no real shared experiences. In terms of IFA businesses, I mean, I don't know of many which actually make a great deal of money. And it's interesting that as IFA industries have scaled up, I mean, the Lighthouse group, which I'm a part of, has around about 600 to 700 advisors in its network. And every time it's scaled up and built up businesses, there's been no economies of scale. It hasn't increased profits at all. So it would be difficult to say what amount of profit is made per IFA, but I would imagine it's actually quite low at the moment.
I think the figures on Lighthouse are what, 60 or 70 million turnover? 80
Yeah,
million?
yeah, and about 117,000 was profit.
Fine.
It's almost pointless, you know, in terms of.
If you think in terms of roughly $35,000 in the industry, average income, average commission revenue generated, and that's going to be totally different next year because it isn't going to be commission. At the average is probably around the 55, 60,000. At the low end, you can get some as low as 30. God knows why they stay in the business. At the other end, you can get people 150 plus, and you do get that still small numbers that are in the 350, 400,000. But if you took, say, 55, 60,000, multiplied it by 35,000 advisors, you probably wouldn't be too far out in terms of ballpark the turnover of the industry. Another way of looking at it is, I believe the total funds under advice or invested life pensions and fund management products is of the order of 2 trillion. But not all that's in the IFA space. The platform market was predicted to get up to about 500 billion over the next few years. It's probably about 30, 40% of the way there now.
Do you have any other questions?
You're talking about that fact finder document.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it seems like a no-brainer that you can have like a website with a big form or an app with those questions in it, and just ask the client to keep updating it. But there must be some drawback to that, or some reason you can't do that.
No, I agree. I think, talking just about, I guess, Lighthouse Group, there's virtually zero technology. I mean, Ian talked about this earlier. There's just huge swathes of where, as Eddie said, it's like the land before time. It's the same processes we're using probably 20 years ago. In terms of, forms, I mean, I know certain IFAs who've adapted that process. They will send out an inquiry form, or they might email something out to a client to say, fill this in. But there's nothing really which, if you take it from the client's perspective, there's nothing the client can take away again. So you imagine, you're being serviced by an advisor and they retire. You want to then move that data and you want to give it to, you want to source a new advisor. There's no way at the moment you can extract that data for yourself as well. So it's not just from the advisor's perspective. I think there has to be something which is much more client friendly and which, like I said, empowers the client to move around as well.
Okay, thanks, Gary.
Cheers, thank you.